the life logging movements, and the idea is that we can know something more about ourselves by collecting our personal data and by exploring our data. Today there is a growing trend in this field of research because there is an increasing popularity of wearable technologies and activity trackers that allow for continuous collection of personal data that could be physiological, behavioral, or simply activity logging. Market forecast has highlighted that wearables, activity trackers will eclipse $150 billion by 2027. And this means that there will be a huge quantity of personal data available in the near future, and also an continuously increasing user base that could be interested in using this kind of technology. However, there are also some potential barriers that could prevent the spreading of these technologies among the larger populations, because there is also an increasing skepticism about the real potentialities of wearables and activity trackers to provide the real knowledge and real benefits to the users. Recent research highlighted that 1/3 of the Americans that purchased the trackers abandoned it after only 6 months of use. So it seems that there is a problem of disengagement, rapid disengagement from these technologies. And so the main design challenge or research question is, are these tools able to engage people, and especially people that are not so motivated to track, because now wearables are mainly used by populations that maybe have a chronic condition or a strong motivation to track the behaviors. But the final goal of this kind of technology is to bring a common technology like our smartphones. So to reach this aim, it is fundamental, it's paramount to try to answer to this question: if these technologies are able to engage people that do not have a strong motivation to track. Like most of the purchasers of activity trackers today, because mainly they are only moved by curiosity and they want to try new technology. So there are a lot of human-computer interaction research about activity trackers users, but the fact is that this kind of research is focused mainly on generic kinds of users. With generic kinds of user, I mean simply trackers that track the behaviors for a variety of purposes, but the study of activity trackers has been never situated in a specific practices, social practices, or communities, or within a specific population. So what I try to do is to investigate the use of this technology in some specific populations. The first one is precisely people that do not have any previous experience in self-tracking, but they are moved by curiosity about this new technology. So I involved 14 participants, asked them to use a wearable air-on and a set of applications for self-tracking, for tracking mood, for tracking activities, for tracking the diet. And we asked them to fill a diary daily about their experience. The study lasted a minimum of 10 days for a maximum of 1 month. They could exit the study whenever they want after 10 days. And this was for investigating natural processes of disengagement about this technology. And a final contest or interview discussing the diaries with the participants. So here there is a table with some quotes from the diaries and the interviews. The interesting thing is that if you look at the second week, you can notice that it's about around the 8, 9, 10 days that people start thinking that this technology is not so useful for them. So the first week there is a kind of enthusiasm, curiosity for collecting data, exploring the numbers they were collecting, but after this initial curiosity, people became aware that these data didn't mean so much to them. So, two-thirds of the participants decided to abandon the study after 12 days, more or less. Only one decided to keep using the tracker for the whole period of the study, so for 30 days, while the others abandoned the study in the third week. So, these are the main findings of the study that highlighted a variety of issues of this tracker that can be divided in how they track the data, how data are managed, how they are visualized, and how they can be used. So, about the first point, we can notice that participants perceive the act of self-tracking as a burdensome activity, because the wearable charge interfered with some practical activity during the day, like washing the dishes or having a shower. And the applications, by contrast, need to be curated, because most of these applications rely on self-reporting. So users had to actively report their data. For example, what they were eating during the day. And this was a very burdensome activity for them. And the fact is that this activity was not so rewarding, because what they got was a series of numbers, but these numbers were not so significant to them. As to the management of data, participants highlighted that all these data were scattered and enclosed in silos, isolated silos, and they were not able to interconnect different data even in the same application. Because most of these applications present data of different parameters, for example, the sleep and the number of steps, for example, as data, as different data in different zones of the interface, and there are no mechanisms of visualization that allow for a meaningful interconnection and reasoning on the interrelation between them. About the visualization modalities, they highlighted that the tools presented excessively abstracted visualizations. Numbers, graphs were not meaningful to them, and there were not recommendations about what could be meaningful. There were no insights highlighted about the data, so they did not find useful the exploration of data. And for all these reasons, they abandoned the usage of these instruments. So this study highlighted a series of issues on the current technology trackers, but then what I wanted to do was to study another population to see a successful application of wearable technologies for activity tracking. And so I decided to study how athletes use wearables in their situated practice. Athletes keep track of their performance for prolonged periods of time, are used to self-track, to track their performances, to track the parameters, the physiological parameters that are connected to their sports activity, and seem to have successfully integrated self-tracking into their everyday practices, finding them useful for their situated goals. So the idea here was that if we can understand why these technologies have been been successfully adopted by a specific user population, maybe we can gain some insights to design better tools even for other domains. So I involved 20 athletes, 12 elite that competed internationally, and 8 amateur athletes, including different sports in the sample, and I asked them to recount the sports experience, how such experience changed due to the introduction of self-tracking technologies, and what kind of impacts these technologies had on their sports practice. We try to highlight 3 themes that emerge from the findings that I consider very interesting to our aims. The first is about the kind of use that elites and amateurs carry out with their trainers. So the elites show what they call the purposive use. They know perfecting what they have to track because they know very well their sports practice, and usually they are focused on 2 or 3 parameters. One is usually the heartbeat, and the other one is contextual and depends on the specific sport. So they focus on these parameters and ignore all the rest. They are not interested in exploring or connecting the data because they say they do not have time to do this, and they do not care about accuracy of their data because they are more interested in differential variations among data, and usually they do not use the tracker during the races, but only during the trainings. And what they do is to monitor the trainings and also after the race look at the anomalies in the practice. Amateur athletes instead show what they call an exploratory use because they monitor a variety of data and seem interested in elaborating a lot on them, looking at their interconnection, they experiment variation of their behaviors and how this impact on their data. And it seems that they have a serendipitous attitude. They are moved by curiosity about their data and about how such data can reveal something about their sports performance. But this is more a combinatory game than a strategy that can improve the sports activity. The second point is connected to the first one, and is about the role of the body and the role of the data collector. Because for the elites, the most important thing is what they call sensations. So the data are a useful tool that may improve the training because it's a commodity, they do not have to track manually the parameters, but they do not rely on the data when they are engaged in an important sports activity, for example, during the race. Because during the race, what they consider is their subjective body sensations, what they feel in their body. And sensation is a very subjective concept because each athlete explaining this concept in a different way, providing different examples. It can be a sensation in the hair, a taste in the mouth, a sensation on their skin. Is something that signal in a much more fine-grained way what kind of level is their performance. Okay. And the interesting thing is that if they use the tracker during the race, the tracker may be counterproductive because it may confound them. Okay. Maybe the tracker says something, but their body says another thing, and the body is always more reliable than the tracker. If they check the tracker, their performance could lower because they may be get anxious about their performance. Instead, amateur athletes keen on allowing the device to regulate all their sports activity, both during trainings and during the races. So what they think is that the variables measured by the instruments are reliable indicators of the performance. And if they modify the data, they also have an increase or worsening in the performance. So there's a direct connection between the data and the performance. And for the elites, this is a negative thing because it prevents them from understanding the sensations of their body, because they rely too much on their devices. The last point is connected to how they are coached, because elites always have a coach that mediates the relation between the athlete and the tracker. So usually the athlete and the coach review the data together that are collected by the device. The coach explains the data to the athlete, and the athlete helps the coach contextualize the data by reporting the specific episodes in which the data were collected. So they build together a shared knowledge about the data. Instead, the amateurs usually coach themselves, and training is a solitary activity. Maybe they train with their friends, but they do not have a reliable person that may explain to them how to interpret the data. So they proceed mainly through trial and error, and this leads mainly to wandering rather than to the development of new strategies that can really better their sports performance. So if we have to summarize the findings of the study, is that let me summarize at this point. The first one is that elites have very specific objectives and goals to achieve, and know very well the precise ways to accomplish them. Amateurs instead are less able to define goals, and they seek help in their devices, but they are not able to find this help in the tools. Another point is related to the knowledge about the body, because for elites, understanding the body is an essential competence. It's worth learning, whereas for amateurs, it's not so clear what is worth learning. The final point is about the social context of these two kinds of population, because elites are engaged in well-structured communities of practice where there are very precise roles. There is a coach, there is competitors, whereas amateurs are embedded in a much more blurred social context. So the two main findings are that elites have learned to assign the right role to their personal informatics device, which is never predominant. Okay? And they know when it is better to not use them. By contrast, amateurs may give an excessive importance to their device, and this may jeopardize the sports activity. So some preliminary design considerations could be that if you want to design trackers for people that do not have a strong experience about their practice, for example, the sports practice, we need to design tools that provide more structure and guidance, recommending how to reach objectives and products. We also need to support the development of the interpretative competence of the user. And finally, we should also be aware that the tracker should not pervade all the activities of the user, but should be capable of recognizing when the tool is not necessary, but may also counterproductive. So, what else can we do about the design of this kind of technology? Well, first point that I try to elaborate on is about the role of theory in the design design of trackers. Because if you look at the original definition that I reported in the first slide about personal informatics, you can see that the purpose of this technology was originally to provide self-reflection and augment, enhance self-knowledge of the user. So there is an important role of the self. But if we look at the theories that inform the design of these technologies, we can see that there is no elaboration about what this self is. So the self is taken for granted, and usually the self is considered simply as the totality of the data collected by the user. This comes mainly by the fact that usually self-tracking technologies use behavior change theories to inform the design of the trackers. And these behavior change theories usually value primarily the behavior. And what they do is a simple equation. So behaviors are objective facts that we can observe in reality. And these objective facts can be easily turned into objective data. So the tracker is designed to sense this data, these behaviors, and feed such behaviors back to the user. And the idea is that by simply feeding these behaviors back to the user, we can increase self-awareness, and then self-knowledge. What you try to do instead is to look at self-awareness and self-knowledge from a different point of view that is not objective but is subjective. And I try to formulate a different framework that starts from how we perceive the reality, and we perceive the reality means subjectively, and considering that we construct the meanings through which we interpret and perceive the world and ourselves. So this has an immediate consequence on the design of this kind of tools that is giving less importance to the numbers and more importance to the meanings. Less importance to the objective behaviors and more importance to the subjective interpretations that the user can develop around her data. Another point, apart from rethinking the theories behind self-tracking technologies, is to look at a successful way of designing tools for interpreting personal data. And it may be surprising, but an excellent source of inspiration is the world of video games. Because in some video games, like massively multiplayer online role-playing games, players have to manage a huge quantity of personal data. And this data refer to the performance in the game, how to maximize their characters, and they are engaged in an activity that is called theory crafting, that is a way to understand how the numeric logic behind the game is working, and to exploit this knowledge to maximize the performance within the game. So what I did is to investigate how players of very popular, massive games like World of Warcraft perceive the numbers of the game and how they are helped by the game interface to manage these numbers. So what I did is an ethnography in World of Warcraft. It lasted 4 years, and it had different goals. One of the goals was to explore the relation between numbers, tracking, and engagement, and game elements. So 4 years of participant observation, 36 formal interviews, hundreds of informal conversations recorded, personal diary kept daily, and All these data were analyzed, and what I will try to do to sketch only a couple of themes that are interesting for self-tracking research. The first one is about data embodiment. It is very interesting how a game like World of Warcraft represents numeric data, because data are embodied in concrete digital objects that can be used because they can be transformed, donated, destroyed, and are connected to the digital representation of the player in the game, that is the avatar, that evolve its numbers, but also evolve its aesthetics, its appearance. So data are not displayed only through abstract numbers, but also through representations that are meaningful to the players, that engage the players, and that make the players identify with their data. So if we try to translate this in the world of personal informatics, we may think to evolve the way we represent personal data in more concrete visualizations that we may think, for example, about data packages embedded into precise graphical representations that can be used by the users, for example, can be donated to other users. And also, we can think of visualization that can grow and evolve with the user, symbolizing different data aspects in their surface. The idea is to develop, to help the user develop an emotional connection between herself and her data. A second point is about self-experimentation. Players in World of Warcraft need to maximize their performance, and to do that, they are engaged in a lot of activities that are like changing some objects, changing how they play, to see if this activity has an impact on the battlefield. So if they can rise their stats and rise the damage that they can provoke on the game enemies. And the interesting thing here is that there are different population kinds of players in World of Warcraft, because novices search for quick answers to big problems, so they want to maximize their characters quickly by having tools that may propose to them some ready-to-use solutions, whereas expert players seek fine-grained tools for simulation on the battlefield and analysis for hypothesis testing. And the interesting thing here is the model of World of Warcraft, because World of Warcraft allows for the connection of different add-ons to the main interface. And these add-ons provide supplementary ways of visualizing the data, different tools for analyzing them, and can be extremely tailored and personalized. And so the same data set can be seen in different ways depending on the add-on that is installed on the computer of the user, and the users can also develop their own add-ons. So we can think of a similar flexible model for self-tracking applications in which data can be assessed in different ways with very personalized tools that can be connected or disconnected to the main platform depending on the idiosyncratic needs of the user. The last point is about communities of practice. Most of the interpretation activity around the data is carried out in what are called the guilds. These are small groups of players that are brought together to face the rise that are the most difficult contents of the games. And in these small communities, players can share their problems about their data and share solutions on how to maximize their characters and how to regulate the stats of the characters. And there is most of these guilds is an informal mentorship in which some players are in charge to explain to novices or to newcomers the best practice to maximize the performance in the game. And this may benefit the whole community, because if all the players are at the level cap and have a very well developed character, all the performance of the whole guild can be enhanced. So here the idea is that mentors can offer extremely tailored suggestions and recommendations to other players about their data. And this can also be translated in the context of personal informatics by designing, instead of large communities, very small communities in which people are forced to open themselves, self-expose, expose their problems about their data, and be open to be helped around their data. Okay. There was another part about behavior change, but I think that.
Well, I think it's okay.
10 minutes. Okay. Because the last point that I want to surface here today is about behavior change. And self-tracking technologies and behavior change technologies are two domains that, in my opinion, are very close, because many behavior change technologies rely on the collection of personal data to provide tailored recommendation about what kind of behavior should be modified. And by contrast, personal informatics technologies often are used to change behavior, because the idea is that by increasing the self-awareness about certain behavior, we can push the user to change a behavior that that is now seen as a bad habit. Okay, so increasing self-knowledge may lead to a change in habits. If we look at the theoretical backdrop of behavior change technologies, we can see a similar problem that we have with the theoretical backdrop of personal informatics technologies. Because most of the theories that are used to inform behavior change systems rely on what I call a behavioral model of change that looks mainly at behavior when we want to change something in user. This does not mean that these theories embrace a behavioristic model of change, but that they value primarily the behavior. It seems natural that if you want to change the behavior of a person, we need to focus on their behavior. This behavioral model has different features because it considers change as externalistic. It means that we look at the external manifestation of change that are concretized in behaviors, while leaving apart the subjective experience of change. It sees change as monistic because it considers change as having univocal meaning. It means that different persons that are experiencing the same kind of change will interpret this change in a very similar Another point is the fact that change is considered mechanistic, so it occurs as almost an automatic reaction. So if we give an application to a person, and this person correctly uses this application for behavior change, it seems that change will follow accordingly, almost naturally. Another point is about the fact that change is seen as fragmented. It means that it is possible to isolate change from the other domains of the user's life. You can change only the food habits of a user, targeting only those habits while not considering all the other behaviors and activities of the user. And the last point is about the fact that change is seen as episodic. So it is framed as a discrete event with a beginning, an end, and some precise phases inside. What I try to do here is a similar in a similar way of what I try to do for personal informatic systems. So to consider the internal experience of change. Looking at how people live their episode of change. So what I did is to interview 20 participants at different stages of their life, asking them simply to recount what they considered the important changes in their life, without focusing on behavior or on behavior change. Each interview was semi-structured and lasted between 80 and 120 minutes. And participants recounted a great variety of changes, from location changes to relationship changes, and even behavior changes. Well, the interesting thing is that all these changes share some features that are opposite with reference to the features of the behavioral model that we have seen in the first slide. The fact is that participants consider the change mainly as internalistic, means that they value the most the subjectivity of change rather than change in their behavior. And even when they recount behavior change, what they value is the internal modification that paralleled the modification of behavior, so modification in their beliefs, emotions, and internal states. The other point is that change is multiple for them, means that similar change is framed and interpreted very differently from person to person, because each change integrates into a body of pre-existing knowledge that varies from person to person. This body of pre-existing knowledge is made up of past experiences, memories, conceptualizations, beliefs that are idiosyncratic to the user. So the same kind of change may mean differently to diverse participants. Third point is that change is intentional and is not automatic, because the perception of not being in control of their changes usually provokes states of anxiety and worries in the users. So what they try always to do is to cope with these negative states by carrying out strategies aimed at bringing control back to their interiority. This can be done through emotional coping or through taming mentally the change. Another point is that change is holistic, so participants explain that it is very difficult to isolate a change because changes are usually intertwined, and usually the effects of change cannot be isolated because it is very difficult to foresee the side effects and the consequences of change to the complexity of this process. And the last point is that change is seen as continuous, because many changes do not have a precise beginning or a precise end. There are no phases. It is difficult to retrace a precise origin, and the time of these changes is accounted as extremely subjective. So it is the time of the consciousness and not the time of the calendar or the time of the clock. So the main takeaways of the study is the importance of subjectivity, even for behavior change or technology design, because there is the need to consider the internal aspects of the user, subjective assessment criteria, meanings, perception of time, and beliefs. The other point is the relevance of reflection and sense-making, because changes need to be mentally tamed and be enriched with meanings to be sensed to them. And the final point is the unpredictability of change. So changes often do not have recognizable causes, and their consequences are often unpredictable. And these are some references on the works that I explained here. Thank you.
Questions from the audience?
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I find it really interesting, the link with World of Warcraft.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm wondering is if it's the same public that will play this kind of game or use some wearable device. What I'm thinking is that it's maybe the whole population wants to use this kind of device, while the World of Warcraft is more targeted towards maybe people that are already familiar with computer science, or maybe they are more already involved in, I don't know, looking at data.
Yeah, what is interesting in World of Warcraft is that it engages a very different kinds of players. So there are players that are keen on analyzing data, but there are other players that simply want to enjoy themselves by playing. But they need to understand the number to play the game at the best. So the interesting thing here is that even for people that are not used to manage personal data, manage numbers, they can do that because the game provides some design tools that help them interpret the data. So most of the players that were interviewed in the game did not use any wearable device, they were not interested in activity trackers. A minority of them were used to also collect data about other aspects of the activity. All of them were able to understand the numbers of the game. That are very complex because there are difficult calculations to do to maximize the character. So there is a quite numeric activity that needs to be carried on to be successful in the game.
Questions?
Have you considered looking at something like Dungeons and Dragons as an evolution of your focus on WoW? Like, I find that interesting because it is such a subjective process that the player is much more involved in an imagination and building a narrative. But there is still that element of managing a large amount of data and using that in the best possible means to be effective. Another project that comes to mind is something called, it's called Helvetica now, but it used to be called Habit RPG, which is it's an online tool which basically allows people to take whatever it is they're doing in life and then give themselves like a character embodiment. So if they complete the tasks for the day, they get experience points and so forth. But I think that could be really interesting, especially with the way in which, with tabletop games, there is often this very sort of nuanced mixture of the physical items that people are playing with, but then people will download applications and things to augment their play experience. No, it's fantastic.
So this is a really good suggestion because the role of the narrative is very important, also to make sense of the data. You know, like I liked here, but many players recount their data through stories
Yeah.
because they connect some specific objects that embed some data to specific episodes in the game, and this is material for creating stories that can be told to others, so data can be transferred by other people also through stories.
Yeah, I guess what would be interesting is to see the difference between when those worlds are being explored and created in the mind of the person, and how that impacts their adoption and efficiency in gaming their strategies versus, say, in World of Warcraft, where that world is pre-generated to a degree and then they're overlaying on top of that. So, yeah, it was fantastic talk. Thank you.
Well, one final question. I was wondering whether you think, if we make the connection between the first study that you presented and the second one, on World of Warcraft, whether you think, these experts in the guild might act as coaches, or and what are the similarities in terms of how they help, essentially newbies to understand and interpret the data.
Yeah, the main difference that coaches obviously are professionals, so they work, and while mentors in a guild are voluntary people that offer their help to others by having an exchange reputation. So, because mentors usually are recognized as reference points in a guild, so there is respect, there is social centrality, and so they are rewarded not by money as the coaches, but by respect prize, willingness to play with them, so bounty, and so on.
Do you think this difference actually makes a difference in the way they offer interpretation for the data, or in the end, it's mainly the same thing?
I think that it's mainly the same because both the coaches and the fleet work together to reach an objective, and also the mentors and the newbies work together to reach the objective to make their guild successful in the game. So if the guild can be successful in a raid, all the players are rewarded with objects, with new equipment. So there is mutual interest to make things work.
All right. So please help me thank the speaker again.